Hey everybody, welcome to the Jeff and Casey Show.
Hello and welcome to the Jeff and Casey Show. I am, of course, your host, Casey Muratori.
Yes, and I'm Jeff Roberts, and today we're going to jump right into our topic because there's a lot to say about it, which is Windows 8.
That's right.
Now, you've been doing a lot of Windows 8 de-evangelizing.
Yeah, is that
like
a term?
Anti-evangelizing.
Do they have devangelists?
You could be a devangelist.
A devangelist.
I like it.
Yeah.
it. We're kind of devangelists in life in general.
That's true.
Because we are a little crabby.
That is
Everything sucks.
Grumpy I think of myself as a grumpy old man.
Yeah.
I guess I'm not technically old enough yet to be grumpy. I'm getting there.
I don't think I'm grumpy. I think everything now sucks. So it's really not
grumpy. That's what that means, though. That's what that means.
What I don't like, and I think we talked a little bit about this, is I don't especially like when everyone else likes something that is obviously, objectively, not even one of those things where you're like, well, it's an action movie, so you're no, this is broken.
Right.
And the fact that it's getting like 80% of Rotten Tomatoes
like The Dark Knight
depresses the shit out of me.
Okay.
Right. It freaks me out. I feel more alien than usual.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's not go on to get buried in that.
Okay. Yeah.
Let's talk about Windows 8. So you have been doing a lot recently.
Yeah. Well, so what's interesting about that is you wanted to do Windows 8 for this podcast, which is interesting because you'd think I would be the one who wanted to do Windows 8.
Yeah.
But no. You want to do Windows 8.
Yeah, and I have a different thing I want to talk about.
So, I mean, I'll briefly recap, but then we'll kind of go into your thing, because that was really the reason for the podcast. So, yeah, my problem in general is I know that a lot of people are sort of platform fanatics, right? There's a lot of people out there who are like really big Windows fans, really big Apple fans, really big PlayStation fans, whatever it is, right?
Right.
And I've never really been, in that zone.
Yeah.
I think the last time that I was that kind of thing was like the Amiga computer.
Yeah.
I used to be like, Amigas are awesome or whatever, right? And ever since then, I've never had that feeling where this is the platform, right?
In the Jeff and Casey way, I've only hated things about platforms. I've rarely liked things about them. I will say the one that really got me was the first iPhone.
You liked that.
Yeah, before it all got, and then Apple got evil and everything. It was like, hey, this is that first iPhone was pretty breathtaking.
That. Okay. I did not
From
have
then
that.
on,
I did not have that feeling about the
I
first
felt like
iPhone.
it took like 2 or 3 months, and then all of a sudden you see the flaws. But that first experience was pretty magic. Yeah.
So my feeling since then has generally been I have felt that computing platforms have almost exclusively been getting worse, right? Because from my perspective, I don't tend to think about computing platforms in sort of I am a consumer buying a computing platform for a particular set of consumer needs and evaluating in that way, right? I tend to look at it because I do software development.
Sure.
I tend to look at it from more of like a long-term approach. It's like, are things moving in the direction that they need to be moving to keep computing interesting and innovative and real? Like, where are we going with this, right? And so in some sense, I've always sort of looked at my initial experiences with computers, which were like in the 1980s. I've always looked at those, and that's as a child, right?
Right.
I've always looked at those as the core part of what drives computers forward. And what that is that a person can buy a computer.
Sure. Okay.
That is a computer that they will use to do things, right? And whatever the things are the computers use for at that time. Spreadsheets, word processing, email, whatever it is at the time.
Right.
It wasn't email back then, right? But I mean, it is now, whatever. They can buy that, and that thing is completely documented in a way that they can then recontribute to what computing can do. So in addition to me doing the things that my computer is already supposed to do as a consumer sort of proposition, I can also become part of the way forward to make the next set of things. Right?
So since people mostly watch pornography on their computers, you just want to be able to make their own pornography with this computer. Without
Clearly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
I understand.
I would not have chosen to put it that way.
Okay.
But sure.
Yeah.
And so to me,
that's not that. I mean, it's absurd, but it is the sense of using a computer to make something creative.
Certainly. Right. And I mean, if you want to make it something that's perhaps less objectionable to people, right? Yeah. It's something as simple as, I get this computer and I do, email on it to connect with my friends or whatever. And then I get this idea, wouldn't it be nice if there was like a way that it sort of kept track of who my friends were, right? And like, hey, then we had Friendster and Facebook, right? That's what those, you can go watch the movie Social Network, which is not super accurate, right? But it gives you the basic idea. It's a kid who has an idea of how to make something cool, and there was nobody there stopping him, right? He could just go make that thing.
But there's, and even taking it away from a technological thing, if somebody's watching this and thinking that, you can think of the same thing of like, hey, parents filming their kids dancing to a Prince song, and then Prince removing any video from YouTube. It's like, it is these are the kind of constraints that prohibit people doing what they are with their devices. One is
it is all about control at some level, but there are definitely different sides of the coin.
Control's the most interesting thing about this whole argument.
It's the part that sits on top of everything. It's about who has the control to make the decisions about what you can and cannot do. Obviously it underlies all of that stuff. But and the reason that I have this feeling is not, it's not some kind of weird, like, random open source zealot kind of thing or anything like this. It's just that is what I have seen actually create the future. Everything you go back to was made by people in this mode, right? That's where the World Wide Web comes from. That's where, like, everything really that you are using today.
So you can forget about the you can forget about the like point of like people should be able to do what they want from their devices, which may or may not be true, but more of the thing of like just historically being able to use your computers in unusual ways is where the breakthroughs happen.
This is where it happens, and and it's everywhere from a kid in a dorm room doing something crazy and awesome to even people at DARPANET, like military funded people, right, using open computer, like even things that were not projects done by some consumer who bought something. We're still taking advantage of the fact that these things were open, because even commercial projects oftentimes would never have happened. If it weren't for the openness.
Well, the iPhone would not have happened without BSD and
hilariously, right? Like Mach microkernel, FreeBSD, these things were required for Apple to ever have the comeback that it had, and it still underpins a lot of their technology today, right? And so what I see happening very clearly as a trend is all of the platforms that we have are increasingly becoming locked down to the point where this is no longer true. Right? They are now, the people who provide the platforms are trying to assert control, often not even for a measurable gain. It is often simply because it is perceived that more control is better. Right? So a lot of times you
I see what
you might even like I don't think Apple sat down and went, when we ship this iPhone, should it be closed or open? And they went and like, here's all the metrics that we use to like hard data determine that our platform will be more successful closed and open. No. They just say, if we have control, it's better, so we controlled it. Right? And like, that's the same thing,
And in fact, I think if people look at the data, almost always open wins.
Open always does win.
And that's one of the interesting things about Windows 8 is Microsoft is a company. Now, it seems funny to say Microsoft is an open company in the software, because it is. They are closed source and all that. But open in the sense that they have always understood that having a lot of software developers without constraints is what makes their platform strong. And it is what makes it still being used by like 95% of people at 95% of computing. Like, it's easy to forget with Microsoft in the state that it's in that they still don't have a ridiculous monopoly. A monopoly stronger than the iPhone by far.
The
stronger than the
monopoly
iPad and tablets. Like even the tablets on iPad, they only have like 65%. So like, forget everything
iPhone
we
isn't
understand.
even majority share.
So
it's not at all monopoly.
But it's not something we even
Windows
think about,
desktop,
because you forget this stuff of like, oh hey, every single person goes into work and works on a Windows machine. They just do. And now Microsoft is starting to play with that. So,
and so to me, this is one of the big things. Like, I in general don't like this about any platform, but a lot of the like with the iPhones or the iPads and those sorts of things, those are less sensitive to me. I would prefer that they all be open, right? But I'm less sensitive to that primarily because that machine, I kind of just don't even like those machines in general. I can't really use them to develop software very effectively. Like, they're not, I don't want my kids to grow up thinking an iPad is a computer, because they can't get their hands dirty with that. They're never going to make cool stuff with that. They're going to make very topical stuff. They're going to like make some little video that they share to the web or something like that. It's like, I want them to know how computers work. I want them to know how programs work. I want them to that to be like an open world for them, right? And so when I think about Windows, I think of the primary desktop platform, and that hits much closer to home for me, because it's like that would have been the platform that I would have taught, you know, the next generation of people. I would have been like, this is where we live, right? This is how you make software, whatever, and like iPads, consoles. They are closed, yes, but there are places that we ship software. We don't build on them, right?
Well, and that's an important thing of like, you could teach somebody to program on Linux or any other Macintosh or whatever.
And we will probably have to now, but yes, I mean, right?
But teaching somebody on Windows is actually important in the sense that if they eventually are going to sell their software, that's the marketplace. That's it. And then like, hey, you may not want to sell your software. You may want to give it away for free. You may want to put it on every platform you want. But right now, the way you make money is on Windows. It's not even on iOS, where you hear these amazing success stories.
iOS is a much smaller software market.
It's a tiny fraction of 1% of the actual software market that's in the general case, which is all right now on Windows.
It's somewhere around, like 100x is a little overstating it, but it's roughly around there. It's the software market is over $200 billion on Windows, and it's $3 billion on iPhone yearly. So you're talking about like, there's no comparison between those two markets, right? People, I think part of that too, and this is probably a topic for a different podcast, but Apple is very good at the PR aspects of their marketplace is good. But the truth is their marketplace is terrible. It's a terrible software market. It's horrible. And, you know, I think you can see that both in the types of apps that are available for it and in the lack of money going to developers. Because what they'll do is they'll take the one developer who made money. You know, nobody made money last month, but this one developer, and they'll be like, developer makes $500,000 last month, and you're like,
it's also
for that one dude, but that's not an industry. An industry has to be many developers, hundreds of developers, sustainably making money every month to employ people to develop.
I think it's also you forget you don't have the sense of scale. So when everyone talks about Angry Birds and like you see the massive amount of just merch that they sell everywhere. Even that is a $100 million company.
It's peanuts.
That $100 million to say Microsoft, they would shut that down. That's not a big enough market for them to continue with.
So Angry Birds, like in their lifetime on that franchise, I think I computed it out to something like $80 million on the franchise, right? $80 million. If you look at something on the PC, like World of Warcraft, for example, is our most successful title to put it. $80 million is hilarious lifetime. They'd be like, what are you talking about, $80 million? It's like, we can make that in a couple months. It's like
Minecraft does more than that now.
It's just poof. Exactly.
And that's a small, So it is just funny of like, people think that it is this gold rush. And the market's actually pretty terrible. And I think a little bit that comes from a lot of reasons, but also I just think it's Apple just in general doesn't value software very highly. It's not something they
are a hardware company. But not to get down that rat hole, because there's definitely a podcast to be had about like is iOS a good marketplace or isn't it, and all the numbers there. So I think the thing, just to get back to the Windows 8 topic, from my perspective, the problem with it there is that Microsoft is definitely actively taking steps now that is going to make this not true. It is not going to be the kind of platform that I feel comfortable with. It's not a platform that's going to be developable, that you can develop in general as an end user and disseminate your software, It's going to be restricted as to what can be distributed on it, like all of these things. The Windows 8 store is a terrible, terrible thing for computing, period.
On the desktop.
Like, on the desktop.
Yeah. Like, who cares about the shitty? Like,
you're talking about RT or whatever.
Like,
ignoring all that stuff. Just think. And the reason for that is because Windows was an open marketplace of software. That was a very important thing. And the fact that
it's the reason they won.
It is. Well, yes. But and the fact that that's now going to be gone is something that I think everyone who is serious about software development needs to really take a look at and go, what are we going to do about this? Because this is not like something that can be left at all. Because again, there's not anywhere you can go, You have to look and go, what are we going to do if Windows just collapses? It's no longer a place where you can freely develop software and freely create your own business model. Like when that goes away and Microsoft's calling on that, what are you going to do? And it's not as simple as just, we'll just switch to Linux or something. It's like, Linux is not a mature enough platform right now. I mean, it has a lot of installation problems. I know because I've installed many distributions. I've looked at a lot of stuff now as a result of this. And we need to do, as software developers, we need to do some serious work to like pave that path, which, you know, I'm totally, you know, gonna work on. Like that's something I'm actively interested in pursuing, and Valve is trying to do stuff like that now and so on. But there's a lot of work to be done there, and I guess, so part of the thing that I've been trying to do, in addition to calling attention to stuff, is just go, hey, software developers, like, we need to care about this, and we need to like basically shut down Windows. Like, we need to move to an open platform.
And use Windows as a platform that you target. It's just another target platform.
It's another console now, right? And we need to build a strong home base, a place for where open software development can work. And that doesn't mean open source. I'm talking about software you sell, like stuff you make money from, right? We need a home for that Microsoft isn't controlling. Because as soon as a company controls it, you are totally at the whim of whether they make good decisions. We know Microsoft doesn't make good decisions. Hopefully nobody needs convincing of that, right? The history of Microsoft's bad decision making is legendary at this point. Whether it's all the way from antitrust on the evil decision making side to just things you look at that they've made decisions that were just dumb or bad or just ill-advised.
One of these things that I think is funny about all this is, forgetting the antitrust stuff for a second, and them being like what they do and didn't think they couldn't do, what they believed they could do and what they believed they couldn't do as part of antitrust. Apple has done them the hugest favor. And you can say in terms of like them wanting to fuck up their own platform. Because Apple dominates people's mental picture of computing now. Even though in the general case they don't, it is a very small amount of the market, but people think about them as our computers of the day. They aren't. Like for the most part, they just aren't. Even if you're a Mac person, you spend and you're a developer, or anybody that does things for work is going to be on a MacBook, He's not going to be doing shit on an iPad. I know one person that writes on an iPad, and he almost lost all his shit, It was a disaster. Salty. Anyway, so we have this thought that like Apple dominates, especially because it like stock price, they do dominate. That doesn't matter. That is like the stock is much of a popularity contest as anything you've ever encountered in high school or wherever that you feel is unfair. That is true of Apple too. And we're definitely actually on that peak, and we've talked about that before too. But what I was going to say about this is, now Microsoft goes, people have taken they're not paying really attention to us. We can start closing off our platform. Whereas if we had done this before Apple had their comeback, the whole antitrust thing would have spun right back up.
Well, because
they still own. They still have. In fact, you could argue that their monopoly is just as strong now.
So here's the thing. Their monopoly is actually stronger now. But I think, first of all, I'll say two things about that. First, I think the antitrust thing is actually still going to happen, right? That push is coming. So I think I will be very surprised if the Windows 8 store does not face like heavy EU sanctions at the very least, if not also in the US, right? Because you simply can't. Microsoft is definitely a desktop monopoly. They have 90% of that market, and nobody argues otherwise. And to literally insert yourself into the revenue stream for apps sold on that is so far beyond even anything they were accused of or convicted of. Well, I mean, they weren't accused of a settlement, but found to be doing in the antitrust case originally.
Yeah, because you have to think about these Autodesk or Adobe. These are billion-dollar companies, 10, 15, $20 billion companies who are not going to live with 30% of their revenue just taken away. They'll ship desktop as long as they can. As soon as it seems like it's not, that whole thing could just spin right back up.
Well, it's 20% of their revenue, but
wait, they're 80-20 split?
They're 80-20 split at the levels of software sales that Adobe and Autodesk will definitely do. I mean, they are massive sales companies, right? So the interesting thing about all of that as well, though, to me, is ignoring all that stuff. Like, let's say the antitrust thing does go down, any of that sort of thing. The thing that I think there's a lesson here, I guess, that I've learned, which is that I think we can't afford to be lazy anymore. Because as a software developer, I think about it, I've kind of been complacent in the fact that like I let Microsoft ship this operating system for me.
Right.
That is the thing that I use to edit my code, the thing that I use to build my code on, right? It's the thing that most consoles use to build their code on now, right? And so on and so forth. And it's part of the way that we develop and ship software and develop software even when we don't ship it on that platform, right?
Okay.
And in exchange for that, we have given up way too much control over our own destiny, right? We have given up too much control over the future of how software gets made because Windows is good enough, right?
Right.
And what I think this is teaching me, or I think this has taught me rather, is that it is very clear to me that you cannot trust these people with that future. Okay, so even if
that's a good point. Right.
Even if they get sued for antitrust or there's government action or whatever happens, even if that happens, right?
It'll just 10 years later it'll happen again.
The problem is that is like we should never let it get to that point, right? It should be up to us as software developers to say we are going to take control over this.
Right.
Like we are not going to let people tell us how the software industry goes because we're the ones who make all the programs.
And you can do these things in steps that are not painful. You can also do these things in terms of you don't have to give up a revenue stream, right? Like Windows can still be a target just like Xbox, just like iOS is, because everybody is doing cross-platform stuff for the most part anyway nowadays. It's just the idea of taking steps towards making your primary environment not one that's under control.
Right.
And the reason
there's two things.
And the reason for that is not because like, oh hey, it might be a pain in the ass to do that switch later. The idea is if smart people are using the platform night and day, it gets better.
There's actually two things. So that's one of them. But there's a second thing that I think is equally important. And what that is professional programmers, like the very best programmers, have not stepped up to the plate and made the proper platform abstraction layer.
Yeah.
Because software right now is very tied to an operating system.
Yep.
And certain software developers have made platform abstraction layers that are okay, but they're internal.
Right.
The software abstraction layers that exist in the wild that you can use are not industrial strength.
Right.
They're not good enough.
Right.
And I apologize to the people who work on things like this, but it's just true. They are not at the level that they need to be.
Yeah.
Such that
you can see that very quickly. I mean, load P4V instead of P4Win and just wonder why everything is fucked. Yeah. Right? Like UI-wise.
And so I think the problem is, again, it's that the complacence and the laziness. I blame myself for this, right? It's like me and every other software developer who's ever done these other parts of things, for internal parts or whatever, we need to stop looking at things that way. We need to go, the most important thing is to like cut operating system people off at the nuts. It's like these people need to just be a dime a dozen, right? It's like we need to be able to build software that will run anywhere and it'll run exactly the same, right? And we can do this. It's hard, but we can do essentially that. And once that's true, all of these people lose all of their power because as soon as somebody can go ship the Ouya, right, or whatever it is, there's just a thing that runs everything,
or
and it's
anything.
$99.
It's like QNX or just anything, just
it's
randomly
done,
shipped.
Right? The control that Microsoft and Apple and these people have over what is able to be shipped as software is over the day that all software is trivial to retarget.
Right.
Because nobody doesn't ship on all the platforms because they don't want the extra money.
Right.
They don't ship on the platforms because it takes work, it takes real effort and experience for them to do so. Right? If I want to go ship something on Android tomorrow, if I want to go ship something on iOS tomorrow, if I want to go ship something on the Xbox 360, it takes real experience to do those things.
Right.
But if we solve those problems instead, and we solve them once, and we have really good people working on that abstraction layers, we can solve these problems.
And it's also funny because people talk about the fact, well, if you have this abstraction layer, you're going to take a performance penalty. Like that compared to, say, running on JavaScript so that you can run everywhere is still hundreds of times better.
Plus,
and it's
I don't think you actually will.
And I don't think, I feel like there are the highest end of what you can get out of any platform.
Yes.
is always going to be you're always going to be able to do a little bit better by native. But you're talking really highest of highest end games are the only thing that need that. Like nothing else needs it anymore.
I don't actually know how true that actually is, right? Because the interesting thing about that too is that we haven't again taken this problem as the primary problem to solve, right? Because what I could make the equivalent argument, for example, about like an optimizing compiler, right? I could say like there's no way that we could like make a thing that will like produce, that will take input code and produce code that runs quickly on both an ARM and an x64, right? But we are getting closer and closer to exactly that.
But we're still farther away than the only point I would say about that is I don't think you can ever say that you can make that perfect. And I think that there will always be some application on a particular platform that's important to use every last drop, and that's probably more true of games.
Here's also, example-wise, we have had generated code that, like from the generator from Bing 2, that has beaten the handwritten code.
Yeah, but sure.
Once you're at
that's a good example of the opposite too, which is the compiler backends that we use still leave 10% of the performance on the table. Like there's still.
But this is what I'm saying. So, and that is because we are not taking that seriously.
Yeah.
Like why did I beat the Xbox 360 compiler? Yeah. That should never have happened, right? But it happens because you have to care about that performance and build the platform abstraction layer in such a way that it is able to generate the high performance stuff correctly, which I think we actually have the capability to do now.
I'm a little nervous on things like some of the new consoles that are coming out where the graphics is much of a coprocessor as it is a GPU, where the kickoffs are so low overhead. You can like kick something off, knock 3 times and read the results. Those are just things that are going to be hard to abstract in any way where they also run on a general operating system as well. The question is that's going to be a small percentage of stuff.
But that's also not necessarily what cross-platform means, right? Like cross-platform does not mean that I can take something that runs on, a GeForce, 680 or something like that. It's like
and make it faster.
Right? And make it run on a Tegra, right? Like that's not a possibility, right? These are two very different devices. What it means is that it allows the person writing the code to understand an abstract description of what is possible to code, right? Such as I have the ability to target a code processor, and here's the language I can use to describe the operations that it does, right? And allow them to very easily read about, understand, and put in code to support those things in a way that will recompile properly on multiple of these coprocessors of a similar like power curve, right? And although, again, even if you look at it from like, well, okay, maybe we can never get it completely perfect because you need to like change too much on either one of these things.
That's okay.
The truth of the matter is almost nobody actually goes and hand codes enough of their code. The tools will do it for everything, right?
I will
get a lot of speed out of that
I will say that it's totally true that if you reduce the problem from getting to another platform to doing a port to simply it runs but it's slow,
right?
Like you can hire people like us, like what Rad does for when we do our consulting stuff of like it works? Okay, we got it from here, and we can go make that run quickly. So that's certainly true that getting to a place where you just simply are running from day one is a good thing. Interestingly, so we do a lot of cross-platform at Rad, right? The funny things I find now when we do cross-platform stuff is not generally the platform. Like we do have abstractions like every game company does that handles all that. And sometimes you find friction where one operating system supports a particular style of primitive. Like, this kind of mutex, we don't have recursive, but everybody else does. All those kind of problems you got to deal with. That's actually not the problem. Generally, when we get running on a new platform, interestingly, the things that take the time are generally bugs that are latent that are now exposed in a new platform. Like, hey, the way this shifted around, it exposed something that was, hey, there was this field that was always aligned. Always. And then on this one, it's not.
Yeah.
And we never really marked up. And then it's like going through and finding that kind of stuff. So it is interesting. Now, that's good in terms of long-term robustness of your code. And in fact, I believe that's the reason why most of our stuff is pretty strong at RAD.
Because it's had to go through the multiple.
Yeah, it's ran on DOS. It ran on Windows. It ran on Linux. And then every one of those found another little tiny little thing. And you could say like, hey, if we were probably more robust about how we wrote it, and then really like set hard-coded or kind of learned better from our mistakes, which I think in general programmers are terrible at learning from their mistakes. But if we did, then maybe that's not as necessary. But it is the thing that in general I run into the most. But again, I guess some of that stuff could be part of the platform.
And these things aren't. This is the point, right? To what I'm saying in terms of the complacency and so on.
Yeah.
Is these things aren't easy.
Yeah.
Right? If they were easy, we would have already had them.
Yep.
Like the open source cross-platform libraries that are out there today would have totally solved the problem if it were easy.
Right.
Right? The problem is these are very challenging problems, right? But we're seeing solutions to challenge, like IPC or whatever, right? We're now getting compilers that can sort of auto-generate SIMD. It's like, hey, they can start doing a really good job now, right? When people who are serious about optimization start working on these tools, people who've been there, people who've written the like hardcore PlayStation 3 SPU like memory transfer DMA nightmares, if they start thinking, how do I make tools that make this easy to do? I think we can get past a barrier that we've been at for 40 years. I don't know how many of this C that gets compiled into some stuff. And it's kind of some assembly language, it's whatever, and it runs. And if we need something fast, we gotta go do all kinds of crazy stuff, right? There's sort of this barrier there that we're never gonna get past.
Right.
But if we start thinking like, it's time for us to take that, like now is the time that we have to take that next step. Because it's like the industry is forcing us into it. I think we can do it. I think we know enough now that we can start to make those next generation tools. And that's the thing that really excites me. Because if you can get to that point, if you can finally hit the point of performant retargetable software, which we're not at today, then OS has become irrelevant. They're not a meaningful thing. And that, I think, is where we need to be, not because I don't like operating systems, but because it seems to be entirely proven that commercial operating system companies cannot be trusted. They simply can't. They always take advantage of the people who make their platform great. They turn around and they stab them in the back.
I think that there's also an interesting thing there. It isn't also just the nature of cross-platform runtime stuff. The other big thing that has to happen, in my opinion, this is something RAD is actually going to do, is getting all the tools. Like, you need an editor. It's very important for a programmer's editor to always be the same. So and that for me is covered. A lot of people it isn't, but I can use Sublime on the other platform and it's exactly the same. That's fine. But there's other things like compilers. Like it would be very nice to have on x86 ones to always use the same compiler. You can't quite do that now, but I think that's going to happen. Kling's going to continue, and they're shipping Windows binaries.
And if you have a thing also like retargetable, like if you can build all of your targets from Clang on one machine. These are huge things, right, that we don't have today, which are ridiculous. Like, we should be able to build any target from any machine.
And we're doing some of those things are really, like, right now, we ship Windows DLLs on Macintosh and Linux at RAD, and then we just wrote a DLL loader. It's not that hard to do, and then you have this thing where, like, okay, now you have one simple target. And then the editor compiler tools, debugger's the big one. Debugger's what RAD's going to do coming up, is like trying to tackle that.
I'm excited about that.
Yeah, me too.
I'm looking forward to
especially because as you know, a lot of programmers, there are programmers that live in the editor who stare at code and figure it out, or there's programmers that live in the debugger, and that's me, where I like, very rarely do I have a line of code that I didn't step through once in there. And so for me, the biggest part of getting to Linux for me is the fact that the debugger's so terrible. So that's what we're tackling next. And so, yeah, but I don't think all these things kind of stack on top of each other. And yeah, even if it's not 100% performant initially, that's okay. Like right now, it's just such a slog. So
I mean, you start with 2D games or whatever. Right? You start with a simple case, and you move upward from there. But I think we can do it.
I think it's pretty simple.
I'm optimistic about it. I think the industry is in a terrible state right now. And it's in a terrible state because of Apple's guidance, because of Microsoft's guidance, because of Sony's guidance. Nobody is taking the openness and the ability to build things when a consumer buys a kit and the ability to ship them to other people. Nobody's taking that seriously. They're all treating it as something that can just go away entirely from the future and it'll be fine. Even though everything, period, including everything that each one of them ships today, would not have been possible without the openness of the past. Right? They are literally biting the hand that fed them in that sense, right?
Well, you think about the entire tool chain. The entire tool chain on every closed platform, except Microsoft, wasn't written by the company that's closing the platform off. Like everything is built on Clang or GCC or open tools, and they all got built that way. And it's funny to think, and the average person when they use their iPhone has no idea that underpinning this entire experience is a lot of stuff that they got for free. Yes, exactly. Anyway. So now, so one of the things I wanted to talk about is, and I joke about this a lot with you, is like whether the store matters that much in the closing, like in the Windows Store.
Yeah.
And my, there's the standard arguments of like, oh, the store can't exist because like the $300 million or what is it? I'm sorry, $300 billion worth of software every year that's sold on the PC will never put up with giving up 20%, all that stuff. But ignoring all that, because that's all boring and like whatever. There's arguments against all of it.
Well, and also Microsoft has not closed the payment model yet. So Adobe will probably set up their own payment system or whatever, right, for whatever. But anyway, keep going.
We recently added Windows 8 on our products here at Rad. And so we have a very small footprint with the OS, and we've abstracted almost entirely. So it's very quickly to get up, especially when you're on a chip that we already support, like x86.
Right.
It's painless.
Right. Because you already have the assembly written and all this stuff.
So interestingly, we started doing Windows 8 for Windows Store apps, not for anything else, but Windows Store apps, being able to ship our libraries to run in apps that are written there. Yeah. And I'm not even talking, let's throw RT out the window. Who cares, right? Like, forget about ARM.
I think consumers already have thrown it out the window.
Just imagine. Well, they're heavy, so
they never brought it into the window, I guess, the first time. They left it outside the window.
So what I'm talking about here is literally a machine. I'm running Windows 8.
Yes.
I have been building previous versions of Windows software on this exact same machine.
That's right.
For about 6 months. On one of my machines, I have Windows 8. I can build using our build tools to build all my stuff. I can debug.
And these are desktop
my
apps
consoles. Yeah, but just desktop apps, and they've been fine. So it's like my thought is that this is going to take a day. Because it's like the same compiler. Let's point out, it's the same compiler.
Right.
It is the same operating system.
Right, yes.
It is the same chip.
Yes,
it is the same ABI.
That's right.
Every single thing is the same.
Yes. Except
that
you forgot
except
one very important thing, Jeff.
And that is that they when you go to the Windows Store app, there's not even a good name for this API anymore.
Well, there's supposed to be.
They call it Windows RT
it was the
API.
Metro thing.
Well, yeah, but they call. I mean, in the headers, it's known as the Windows RT API,
WinRT.
Which is weird because RT also refers to the fact of a Windows that runs on ARM. So it's a confusing thing of like, hey, what the API? They just named it poorly.
Well,
they could have got a next gen Windows API or something.
What they were thinking, right, was Windows RT, the Windows runtime, is a layer that you write to if you want to be able to run on all Windows devices, and the Windows RT platform is a device that can only run the things that are written on Windows RT.
It's a message problem, in my opinion. It's very confusing.
One of many that they have, yes, but
it's even hard to say.
That's
for us,
where that comes from, right?
It's even hard to say for us as a software developer, like, oh, you want a licensed Bink? Do you want that for Windows RT? And they know, no, we just want Windows 8. I'm like, well, okay. So now it's like this weird thing of like, do you want the Windows Store app version of?
True. Don't tell me. I had to write that article. Like, it was impossible to even refer to stuff.
Yeah.
You're like,
nuts.
When I'm saying Windows Store apps, I don't mean that they necessarily came from the store. I mean, even if you built them on that machine, like I'm like trying
it's
to,
nuts.
But it's like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Anyway, so all of those things are the same. The Windows RT API is ostensibly I was like, okay, it's Win32. They probably took away some of the,
Okay.
you know, we took away some of the insane things that you'd never do on a low-end platform.
It's not Win32, is it? I thought it was totally not Win32.
It is not Win32.
It's not Win32 at all. Right?
Well, I should say this. There are similarities.
I haven't written for
and
it
the
yet.
similarities are such that it's almost worse that they're similar.
Okay, because you expect them to work.
You expect them to work a certain way.
Right.
And what is clear to me, so we have ported Iggy to consoles,
right.
which with an insane level
What's
of
on the
optimization.
3DS?
Yeah,
Right?
I mean,
That's-
but even I'm just talking about like, okay, when we go to run on a 360, we are doing insane shit
Okay.
where we are like DMing at the same time we're rendering and like
Okay.
it's insane the amount of stuff we do to make it fast.
DMing on the 360.
Yeah.
Into the ED
Yeah,
RAM.
well, yeah, to getting
Okay.
in and out
Okay.
of the ED RAM.
Okay.
Because you're overusing that because
Right,
it's so
because
damn
it's
tiny.
tiny.
Anyway, but I'm saying it wasn't a recompile. It was a lot of work.
Okay.
It took less time to make a Windows Store app on x86, on Windows, on the same machine. I didn't
You mean
have
more
to,
time, I'm
Yeah,
assuming?
yes. Like it took longer
Okay.
to get a Windows Store app API working than it did to do the optimizations at an insane level.
Okay.
For Bink, which is like so much less complicated than Iggy.
Oh, that's
it's
true.
insane.
That's true.
And just to be clear, this is Fabian doing this. Fabian
Right.
at Rad, who
Yeah.
if you set the Fabian test of like if
Right.
Fabian can't
Yeah.
do it,
Then it's all over.
It's all
Yeah.
over. So my point about the
Right.
store
Yeah.
is nobody is going to be able to make apps that run. Like they're going to be able to take really simple apps that don't do anything. I mean,
Well, so what I'm assuming, right, is, and I don't know, but I would imagine that most of what people are shipping on the Windows RT layer is actually not
iOS shit.
C or C++. It's probably
Yeah,
like JavaScript,
probably, yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, they're probably never even.
But their apps are
Right.
not coming from Windows. They're coming from other really constrained
or they're
awkward
writing them.
platforms.
They're writing them anew in like they're
Yeah.
not writing them in C or C++.
They're in C#,
probably,
yeah.
right? And so they're probably not even seeing most
So-
of this disaster.
What's amazing to me is how much whoever designed this API or whatever, or the people
Yeah, I'm sure
didn't
it's more than one
even
person.
think about the experience of using it. It's insane. There are simple
Yeah.
things like we have create mutex in
Right.
Windows API. You can't use that. You have to use create mutex ex.
Okay.
Create mutex ex has an extra parameter. That extra parameter always has to be 0 on
Okay.
Windows RT.
All right.
There's no reason for that to have ever existed. Like
Right.
you could macro.
Right.
Like there's no reason. Not only
that's not-
but wait.
Yeah.
Not only that, create mutex has a 0 that's like for future expansion.
Right.
You're just like,
Well, they
what are
needed
you
another
doing?
one.
They,
But that's like, I mean,
but let me finish.
that's an example of someone just being stupid, but
Yes.
that is not particularly
No.
problematic, right? Like
so
that
now,
is not,
that's
know.
simply annoying.
Right.
That's where you're like,
because you make the macro,
and you
or
just
whatever
keep
you do,
doing
right?
it and
Yeah.
keep doing it and keep
Right.
doing it, and you're just like, this is absurd. It's
Right.
just work for no
Right.
good
Yeah,
reason.
it's silly.
But let's set aside those,
Yeah.
and there's a ton of them. There's
Right.
stuff in there where this fails the smell test of like
Right.
a second-year programmer would go,
Right.
wait, why are we
Right.
doing this?
They don't have any second-year
Right.
programmers left. Those are all gone.
Yeah, apparently.
They're only first years and interns at this point.
The bigger stuff for us are things like there are no threads. They said.
Yeah.
And you're
I don't know what's going on with that.
that is you're like, wait, that's impossible. And they're like, well, no, okay. Well, we have these things, and it's the thread pool.
Right.
And the thread pool is something that you have little tasklets. They call you and
Right.
do it, and like we'll start.
Yeah.
And to be clear, I think that's a good thing to be in the OS because there's
Right.
lots of times when you have like game stuff and R stuff that are little tasklets, and now you have to have some weird threading thing where like you kind of oversubscribe and like, oh, so it is kind of nice to be in the OS.
Okay.
That being the only thing is
Right.
insane.
Right. That
And
someone is in the deep end of the thread pool at that point.
Because-
Yeah. It's like they didn't see the no diving
Yeah,
thing,
no dive.
right? And they're in the thread pool full up to their
now
neck
what's kind of
and
amazing
sinking
is
quickly.
it's clear when you look at this API
Mm-hmm.
that what happened is they did that.
Yeah.
And then somewhere along the line, someone said, oh, guys, there's a shit ton of things that threads do
Yeah.
that aren't tasklet. They're just like background shit that happens all the time.
Right.
Right? How do we do that? So they added this flag to the thread pool creation where you can say this task runs all the time, and I want you to swap me out if my time slice. And I'm like,
that's
a thread. We had an API. So you you could have just turned on this other API. This API that you're like, oh well, I want to keep it slim and stuff. The API's still there because it's running every old app all day long. Well, and in fact, on that platform, the thread pool is sitting on top of that API even. Yeah. So, and that is the things, and again, like you can sort of make wrappers, but a lot of that stuff is just so different now where like, well, okay, and nowhere else in a single platform do you abstract how often you want to be task switched.
Right.
And you go, well, that doesn't matter because you're sleeping in it. And it's like, no, you get beat patterns all the time. If you say, only wake me up 30 milliseconds, but you're waking up and you're doing work for 13, you have this weird prime number thing where you're like, oh, you skip a big long thing. And then like in I.O., we just drop out. So there's all kinds of designs like that. There's things like...
But I would just point out something too with the thread pool situation, right? Like, current threading systems, the primary problem with them is that you don't have enough control over when things are... I've never written threaded code before and gone,
God, I wish I had less control.
I've got too much control over when my stuff is running here. Like, this is really a problem for me. I just don't know what to do. It's like, no, it's usually stuff like, gosh, I really wish I could tell the operating system that I need this thing to wake up, right before
this. These two threads are related in a complex way and don't just randomly. Yeah.
So I have to do something kind of crazy to work around it. And so, like, the concept that we would go to something even more abstract is ridiculous.
Well, the amazing thing about this, and this is, I'm picking on this particular one because it is such a complete fuck up. And I haven't even hit the big one, and that's this. The idea behind the thread pool is that when the machine is running out of juice or running low on juice or any number of things that the operating system decides.
You're talking like a battery-powered machine.
You're talking
low on batteries.
Yeah.
What you're talking
Let's just use that as the example, but there's other places that this could happen. What Microsoft says the reason for the thread pool is because the thread pool...
They actually stated a reason?
Yes.
Where
the
is this
the reason for the thread pool is because they can shut down cores, and your thread pool, the design of a thread pool app is these little things that run. So you can be running with 30 things, or hey, they can slide it back to one, and it still works. The concept that somehow the OS is deciding for not just me as the developer, but also the end user what to do with their app is this incredibly invasive thing of like, Microsoft can't make a platform that lasts more than 6 hours, right? Why do we think? Why are they in charge of like deciding when the battery life's going to go short? They don't know what the fuck they're doing all the time. And then the idea that like, oh, I'm sitting there playing a game, or I am typing in a web browser, and they go, and the cores went away, so immediately all of a sudden the timing is wrong in the game, or all of a sudden the typing slows down such that like your natural key rhythm is disrupted, is absurd. There's no way. Even Apple lets you have threads, right? Even Apple is not trying to have the operating system vanish hardware out from it.
Because they do that with memory, right? They do that kind of thing on iOS with other system resources.
It's just bizarre to me that on top of there's things like sound resources that just vanish. These things that are you just say, oh, you just wrap it, and like not all these things wrap anymore.
Well, that's the other thing, right? The core sort of point of problem there is that also kind of demonstrates how little you are committed to performance, right?
Right.
Because in general, performance is not something that has granular scalability.
Right.
There is there is no such thing as an application which can do something like take as a parameter the number of cores to run on and like granularly scale. It's like, because performance is very much about targeting a specific thing. And so you can have, for example, an application that has two modes, right? You might have and for example, PC games will do this a lot, right? There's settings, and I can go in and I can say, I'm going to turn these things off to get a higher frame rate
Right.
or to use less power or whatever it is, right?
Yeah, run the game in low. But
Right.
I chose that.
Not only did you choose it, but that's
It's not on the fly.
But well, no, right. But that is about picking the feature set to decide how much power you're going to use. You cannot dump all of those features into a thread pool and have it start scheduling them all on one core, right? That doesn't make any sense. So the app needs to be the person who knows how to respond to a need to reduce battery, whoever it comes from. If you're like, we need to reduce the number of cores, that's fine, but that's an event. The event is, we need to go into low power mode now. And so a game goes, okay, I'm going to turn off all of my shit that I'm doing. I'm going to kill all of these things that were in the thread pool. They're done, right? Like, and we're going to start some new ones that are different. And that's the reality of how the programming has to actually work, is you have to reconfigure that way. So the concept that you would need to introduce an abstraction layer that makes it so as a programmer on an app, I don't need to know that you're scheduling them on less cores is beyond ludicrous, if that's actually true. To be fair, I have not used these thread pools, so I'm taking you at your word here.
Yeah, the other awesome thing about all this is that you can, let's say it goes into low power, and it starts scheduling on fewer cores. The app didn't know this happened. Maybe there's a way to find out.
There must be.
But let's assume that the concept is, with this API, that you don't have to do that. They're still feeding crazy shit to the GPU 100% of the time. They're still sending textures that are like to that, like
they don't.
That's
know
not that's the thing that's chewing the juice too. And like, you're not going to just like all of a sudden shrink everybody's textures. It's offensive to me that like, oh, you don't understand. You'll do this wrong. So we'll do this right. And I was like, you can't do it right. You can't. There's not a right way to do that. There's not an abstraction that lets you do that without the app being involved in that brokering of resources. And so anyway, so my point about the store of all this.
I would guess, right? And I mean, I feel like most of these things come out of the same problem, which is that, this is good programmer, bad programmer, right? Good programmer always writes the usage code first, right? And bad programmer doesn't. That's just true. It's across the board, right? The better programmer you are, the more often you write the usage code for something you're going to do before you write the thing.
Right.
It's like rule number one.
Yep.
And the reason is because only when you actually sit down and make the actual thing in the actual way that it has to work do you really know what is required to make that thing work properly.
Right.
And I would imagine that the vast majority of all of the new Microsoft APIs, just as actually, unfortunately, many of the old APIs in the previous versions of Windows, and many operating systems for that matter, are written without serious professional applications being developed as test cases first.
Right.
Going, here is how these things will be called, right? And so pick up a Windows RT device and you will see that there exists no performant application for it. Well, so we know they didn't have one because they're still on 10.
That's a whole thing where they're like, RT is completely asynchronous. You need to write everything with these little tasklets that do everything. Their own apps are janky as hell and
totally
slow. And this is a 1.5. This is not a slow thing. This is 4 cores. This is a pretty good GPU. It's not great, and it's just. Yeah, it's just everything. I'll put you. Let's just say the last thing: a Windows RT app written completely in C++ and assembly on an x86, hardcore, really focused on your SSE and everything else to make it fast. The entry point is managed, so you're just like you've already lost.
And
you
don't want to see that stack frame too, because I bet by the time you get into your app, there are like 5,000 return addresses on the stack. Like you have to go all the way down there to get, who knows what's happening. You're inside a string constructor that parsed some stuff that loaded. There was a file object that opened, and it's still in its constructor, and you're going through, and it's. Yeah, you're having a party in there by the time you get to your app, I bet.
The other awesome. Let me just say one last thing that's pretty awesome is. When you build these Windows apps, you build them with, hey, I'm building RT, and you set a whole bunch of. I mean, I'm not even talking about like the deployment and like how you get.
Good God! I have a certificate key, and I'm signing.
It's 10 times worse. It is 10 times worse than iOS, and I'm on my own machine. This is not like copying to something.
Like a little device. It's an
not.
actual. Yeah.
So one of the awesome things is you can call the old APIs. They're there. They're all there.
They just
Everything's
won't certify
there.
or something?
You have to run a Windows tool called a Windows certification thing to see if you used anything illegal. Like right now, like the way we got it up and running quickly is we were just like, I don't want to deal with this red pool yet. I'm going to deal with it, but I don't want to deal with it yet. Let's get it all running and the rendering and all that working. Okay. Just like, call the old stuff. You just can't ship that. Yeah. You're just like, everyone is fired. Right. Everyone is fired. The other, if you do build for an ARM device, that's not true. But at least for an x86, everything's there, and you just have to not use it.
Well, I mean, for those 50,000 consumers you won't be able to reach without without ARM support. You sure you want to take that step, Jeff? There's a massive lost profits there. By the way, they're all Microsoft employees.
Yeah, it's pretty insane. Yeah. There's also awesome stuff of there's yet another sound API, which puts the number of hey, wave out to direct sound to X audio to Wasabi to down to core audio. They just keep you'd think, the monkeys on a typewriter get Shakespeare. Yeah, you'd think that eventually an audio API would accidentally work.
Well, here's the problem. Have you read Shakespeare? Because most of it's crap. That's the thing that no one points out. It's yes, the monkeys will eventually type Shakespeare.
Wherefore art thou, reverb?
Right. A lot of Shakespeare plays are really bad, right? And and very inaccessible, which is basically what this API is, right? Bad and inaccessible. And so I feel the monkeys may be typing it, but they're not typing anything good.
Anyway.
The
just to sum up, the funny thing about this is I don't think it's possible to write big applications on that.
Well,
I just don't.
Possible.
I don't think it is.
I'm sure it is.
Well, I'll put it this way. Office on ARM ships in this weird desktop mode.
Oh, yeah.
They have some.
That's
what's amazing about that is RT for ARM has no desktop mode. There's no desktop mode. There's no desktop mode.
Right.
If you run Office on an ARM device and hit File Save As, bloop!
Yeah.
It's a desktop. Yeah. There's a trash can in the corner. Yeah. It's the real. No, it's still there. Yeah. They're just the only ones that can use it. And you know why? They got 40 million lines of code. There's no way they're going to get running on Windows RT. So my belief is they're going to course correct.
Antitrust.
I hope that I'm crossing my fingers that they course correct by Windows 9 or 10 and go, okay, all right. That was another Vista disaster. And it's true, in Europe, they're selling Windows 7 is still selling 9-to-1 to Windows 8. So on desktops. Yeah. So it is totally possible. All right, we got another Vista in our hand. We got to course correct back the other way. Put the start button back in, and then have this other mode. The envision of what Windows 8 in my head was.
Yeah.
And actually, when I use it in the way that they want you to, it's not that bad. In the sense of, I'm working all day on my desktop on Windows 8. I've installed a little start bar button. It feels like Windows 7. At the end of the day, I'm I want to watch a video. I can hit the Windows thing, and Netflix and the video player and all that is nicely integrated into the environment. And it is I'm mentally switching modes because I'm not programming generally while I'm doing that. So I don't mind that switch there, and I kind of, or if I'm surfing the web, if it's this nice, smooth, web-optimized UI, I would have been happy with that. It's this weird thing now that it's neither one of those things, right? Where it's not that great to surf the web. It's really slow for some reason. I guess because they sandbox the shit out of it, but the surfing on the browser on the RT side is much, or on the App Store side or the Metro side is way slower than the exact same browser on the desktop side.
I guess from my perspective, I was actually kind of hoping if before they started doing all this ridiculousness, before I found out about this ridiculousness, I guess they were always doing it. But before I found out about this ridiculousness with the Windows 8 restrictions and the stupid API layers and all this stuff.
Right.
I actually having a Windows that was good on tablets is great. Mm-hmm. That would have been great. And I like the UI. Mm-hmm. I have never liked the iPad UI.
Right.
So I wasn't thinking I didn't pick up a Windows device and go, oh, this is
terrible.
Terrible. Anything. I was like, oh, I would rather use this than an iPad probably. So it's entirely all of this just gets back to, I guess incompetence and greed on the dev side. Really, it's they are greedy because they want to lock down the control. They want the control for themselves. They want to keep that control. That's that's a policy problem.
Even though their whole company exists
because of open.
Not maybe because of open, just because of a conscious decision to be open. Like
that's
they decided to
Yep.
open their environment.
Yep.
Everybody can write on Windows. That was
right.
their plan.
Yep.
They beat Apple already.
Yeah.
They'd beat them again if they did the same thing. I mean,
All
Google's
the-
already beating them.
That's right.
Following a similar strategy.
That's right. Yes. So there's that, right? And then the other side of it is just incompetence on the dev side. Like they clearly are fully off the rails.
Yeah.
They don't understand what it takes to create a proper SDK for people to use. Because again, the goal of any software development environment is to let people do the thing they're trying to do with the minimal amount of effort, right? That's what you're always trying to do. So there's a couple ways you can know if you didn't do that. And one of them is your API is like 80,000 calls long.
Right.
You probably aren't doing something wrong. Another one is if your like hello world example program is like 1,000 lines of code plus like tons of library stuff that they're like generating for you with like XML types. Like this is a problem because hello world used to be one line of code. It was like printf hello world, right? Like
It's
that's
also
what it should look like.
It's also like if you look at the DX examples, they come with this huge framework of shit. And you're like, game. And the first thing we do, and this is true of most of the consoles. I mean, the first thing we have to do is unravel that shit.
And find out what's
because
going
we want
on.
an example. Like the
That
whole
actually
point
works.
is we want an example program that's less than 1,000 lines that shows how to use our product.
Yeah.
That'll be 950 lines of setting the shit up now.
Yeah.
And all the work is actually unraveling the goddamn framework, right? And it's like, that's not what people want.
Right.
Like you can actually get up and running on a 360 from nothing way faster from the Bink example program than you would from the crazy framework. Because you're like, wait, there's a callback called render? I'm like, am I supposed... So I draw there. Where do I do my work? Where's my goddamn game loop?
Yeah.
It's a game console. Why is there no game loop in this? There's like some weird idle thing. And you're like, no, this is not how people write code. Not that your own customers, a narrow niche you weren't able to hit correctly.
Right.
So I don't know. It is so the kind of funny thing I've been saying is that the store doesn't matter as much because there's no way any apps end up over there. But we'll see. But I mean,
I hope that's true.
Yeah, I think the point. But the point was well taken. Of like, even if we don't get fucked by this, even if Windows 9 comes out and they're like, all right, my bad, we're putting you can ship. We let you you can ship store apps whether you buy them or not. You can download them from somebody's site because that's all I want. That would solve a big problem. It's like fuck, keep your store. I don't care. If you can compete and like earn that 20% by making the nicest, like I press a button and my app's on there and I can update it.
You're still going to be sanctioned by the EU. Like there's nobody's business. Having only your store installed by default.
Yeah.
You can't even have only your browser installed.
Right.
They will be getting sanctioned even if I have to call up the European Union myself and remind them to do so. That's going to happen, and I'm going to enjoy it.
Okay, so even if that was an option, so that'd be fine. So I can ship these goddamn crazy apps, charms. No,
they're not charms. Charms are things on the little bar.
But I mean, you use to make a charm. There's no way to make a charm using the desktop API.
You cannot make a charm, period.
Wait, charms are off limits?
Charms are what Microsoft ships on that little bar.
Okay, I thought the charms were that's hot tiles.
You're thinking of a live tile.
Live tile.
Get the terminology right for crying out loud.
Anyway, this is probably it got some branding issues. The funny thing is they brand everything.
Yes.
And the brands are just like, they've gone bananas on this. Yeah.
The brands
are bananas.
Because the best part of it is that they switched to live tiles, but...
Then they killed Windows Live.
They killed Windows Live. It's like, so they're like, wait, it doesn't matter.
Ship it. So if in Windows 9, they even reverse course and we put the start button back in so people in desktop mode are not fucked.
Right.
And they fix the store, even if they and allow multiple stores and allow you to download Metro apps just from somebody's site. Let's say they did those two things and okay, whatever. That's great.
Right.
But that doesn't mean it's not going to happen ever again.
Well, this is the problem, right?
So,
this is the George Bush, like, fool me, can't get fooled again, right? Like, fool me once, shame on me.
Right.
Fool me.
Fool me,
can't get fooled again.
Yeah, can't get
fooled again. Whatever that great line is.
He does pause where he's definitely, and I feel bad in that one because you can.
He's trying.
He's reaching for it, and it's hey, he knows there's a gap, and it's and then that's the only thing that comes. And I would totally say.
But
something
I like
the
way he dismissed it too. He's like, well, fool me, can't get fooled again. Like he says it like in a colloquial sense, like everyone knows. Can't get fooled again.
I would so do that.
You would do that. You're like our own little George. You say nuclear.
I can't say nuclear.
Nuclear. That's what you say. Nuclear. Nuclear. Yeah. That's just like he says it, I think. It's nuclear.
Yeah. In the Midwest, like
nuclear.
Yeah.
Okay, nuclear.
Ginger's on board with that too.
Who?
Ginger.
Yeah, that's probably true. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I think the thing that everyone has to ask themselves is, how many times do I want to go through this?
Yeah.
We went through it once before, in a much less sense, right? Where I felt like it was maybe the thing with the antitrust before is a lot of it was focused on like the Netscape situation like that, which I didn't really care about because I don't care about Netscape. I don't know, like that was a thing. But one of the interesting things about the antitrust thing before was all the ridiculous like required bundling with hardware and all that stuff. Like that stuff really was bad for the industry. Like you want open competition among operating systems. It's never bad to have open competition. If Microsoft is the best operating system, then they will win. So it should be fine, right? And if they're worse, people should have the opportunity to not be at a disadvantage if they want to go buy something else, right? I feel like, anyone who is into the standard American capitalism model, if you believe in that, like that is how that works. You can't have monopolies and still have capitalism. They don't work together at all, right? Like monopolies are the sort of communist. They are the thing that people claim to hate about socialism. When one person gets to decide everything that you get to do, and you don't have that competition. So assuming that you're on that path, you have to go like, okay, obviously they did this before. They're doing it again now. So there's no reason for us to assume that these are isolated incidents. It's just as soon as they were able to do it again, they did. Right? I would
say even an example that is closer to me, which is they've tried to wreck the PC platform twice. Vista came out after 5 years. It was a disaster. Nobody used it.
Well, I don't know if tried to wreck. I don't.
No, but I mean like
Vista was an accidental wreck.
Yeah. Even, let's say Windows, maybe they're just idiots and they don't realize how bad they're messing things up. I'm just saying we have now 2 recent examples of them crashing fucking PC sales while Vista was out. Like, causing problems for HP and Dell and all these companies that are like, fuck, your main operating system is fucking us up.
So even Valve, I remember, was saying that
it is. Gabe
Windows Vista's custom was a disaster for them. They said for them, right? And it's like
Gabe was totally right on this, and I actually looked right past it. And it is like they almost fucked up PCs. They came out with Windows 7 that just kind of they did improve some stuff, but it was a lot of just rollback of the broken stuff in Vista. And you're like, oh, thank God. And here they do it again. So they've done it twice now recently. Yeah. So there's a good chance. Yeah. Like, I mean, we hope 9 course corrects. They may correct the other way and make it worse. Or they may make it better and it's 10 again this fuck. We have no idea. The point is we have ample evidence that relying on them is dangerous. And that's one of the reasons why, like for us, Rad particularly, our Linux sales are tiny. And not only are they tiny, we generally have to sell the licenses cheaper, right? Because the games are smaller. Right. But in all of our sales, it's 70% Windows. If Windows is away, we're screwed. So that's why we're investing in Linux. Is like it needs to get better by the time that's our only alternative.
Well, I think the other thing there too is I look at Android actually as a good example of how surprisingly easy it is to get something done in this space. Yeah. With apologies to Google, who is trying to do a lot of good things, I think, actually. Android, especially when it first came out, was a piece of garbage. Yep. That was a terrible, terrible operating system.
But it was open, and so people lived with it.
Here's the thing. It was a freely available, hardware-agnostic thing that hardware vendors could use to ship a product. And you know what? Every last one of them did. It is everywhere now. So what that says to me is that hardware vendors are ready and willing to ship devices if they are given a stable, supported operating system that they can ship that actually has some consumer appeal to it, that they will ship it. So I think people are just waiting to get off the Microsoft bandwagon because they feel, even if you haven't thought about it the way that I'm saying, you felt it. You know every day you are in a bad world because of this. You know that your life is harder because Windows driver development is a pain in the butt. The Windows operating system is sketchy and changes too much.
Well, think about the business customer who's like, shit, we can't go to Windows 8 because it changes everything, and we don't have.
We can't even ship our own apps without enterprise
we're just not
license
gonna, There's no reason. Now we're just doing Windows 7, which hey, maybe that's an alternative, except for the fact that Windows 7 doesn't have any of the latest drivers for anything. So out of the box, you're like doing weird pushes of drivers, and like now you can buy the Windows 7 or not buy, but you can download the ISO where people have put in all the latest drivers from some goddamn place in Turkey or somewhere. That's gonna be fine. You're just like,
don't worry about it.
This is fun.
There's no chance that like the Chinese hackers haven't put anything in there. Right? That's damn it. Right.
Anyway. So
so I think personally, I feel like at this point it seems pretty clear to me that our problem right now is actually an organizational problem, not a technology problem, and not a market problem.
Maybe not even organizational, just like a commitment.
It is. We have not gotten together and established the leadership and the determination to take a bunch of our highly skilled people and solve this problem. Right? Because if we did, I think it is game over. Because there's only one of two things that can happen. Either that thing takes off and it becomes the new standard that people ship stuff on because everyone's sick and tired of this crap, or everyone else has to step up their game. And if they do, so much the better. If Microsoft magically stops shipping non-crappy stuff routinely, so much the better. But that's not going to happen, I don't think. So I think we're pretty much
one thing that's kind of interesting is whether it's going to be Linux or whether it will be Android on the desktop, which you can download and install now on machines just fine, right? They have an x86 version. So it is kind of interesting of like, they're very similar.
I think Java as a basis for your system is really
that's true. Most of the native stuff is
that's like
most of the there is all native APIs, but a lot of them thunk. So that's true.
No, it's not good.
Yeah. There is Ubuntu on tablets coming, so you can see that. I think in 6 months you'll be able to see Linux on small devices.
I think we need, there's a lot of software engineering that has to happen. But I think if we start now, and we're serious
if you get
about
the tools in place, then you can
start. A couple years before this is all.
Then you can start solving the things like, hey, the installers are all ridiculous.
Just fix all that. It's all fixable. It just takes the work. You got to sit down and do it.
Yeah. I mean, because there are things that are just magically better already on Linux. Like if your machine won't boot, you can get Linux. Like if you have a disk problem, like every disk utility in the world now comes on a Linux ISO, right? It's just a distribution on a USB key that boots up because like they care about that shit. By the way, we could have a whole thing about the nightmare of booting now. Of like we could talk about how insane that is. We should do a podcast just on that.
Linux has a lot of problems, but like I said, they're all solvable problems. I don't know whether you care about solving Linux's problems or if you just make something else. I don't know exactly what the right solution is. All I know is it's not that hard. And this is an example I was throwing around the other day that I think is worth noting, which is that most of the problem of writing an operating system is if you try to make it run on a lot of different hardware. But you don't really have to do that anymore, right? You could I think this thing could even be successful if you just said, listen, this is it. This is the hardware specs. They gotta conform to this, and that's it, right? It's it's.
You could make a good argument that if you made it run on an Intel-based laptop, that's 50% of the machines sold in the PC market.
Right, and Intel integrated,
just
whatever.
Deal with that, and then add the fancy stuff later.
Here's the other thing.
I mean, that's not what you want to do because you want to target the high end too, because those are the people that actually make the thing. But there are the software things. I mean, you can make the list, but the big ones are there's no Quicken, there's no Premiere. GIMP is fine. I've used GIMP. Inkscape is great.
Well, but there's non-software things, right? You like the audio needs to be fixed. Yeah. They've had 4 audio systems now, I think, and they're all very bad. So the audio needs to get solved by someone real. Yeah. You need to go like, this is how audio is done. It is correct, and we are sticking with this system for the next 10 years. Like we are going to refine this system, and off we go. Right. That needs to get solved.
Have you ever looked at the SDL code for audio? It's insane. It's insane. I mean, they do wrap all that shit in a not very good API, but it's all wrapped. But it's insane.
So there's also the fact that like the ext file system is, and the way that it works is not good.
Yeah.
Like checking file dates takes
ZFS
hundreds of times more than NTFS performance-wise, which is a disaster for source code control utilities and all these sorts of things. There's a lot of like systemic problems. They're not hard to fix. Again, it's just somebody has to go fix that.
Well, ZFS was supposed to be the savior. That was going to be the thing that everybody would be running on by now.
Is that going now?
It's fantastic, but no, Oracle bought when Oracle bought Sun, they have the patents on that stuff, and unlike Sun, they're like, no, you can't use it. That's why ZFS was supposed to be a macOS, but it's not because of Oracle rights problems.